This is Juliet Gladies Jayasuria. Welcome to Evaluate to Motivate segment. In this segment, we will be talking to champion evaluators to learn from them the art of evaluation. Today, we have with us Ron MacTavish from Canada. He's a Toastmaster for 40 years and has a wide experience in evaluating thousands of speeches in various events. Hello, Ron. Welcome to Evaluate to Motivate session.
Hi, Juliet. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us in the session. So let's start the questions with you. So tell us about your journey as an evaluator.
When I joined Toastmasters, obviously everybody joins because they want to learn how to deliver a speech better. And one of the things you quickly learn is that you get better by evaluating other speeches. That helps you give better presentations. So it's not something that's apparent when you first join, but you pick it up right away.
So that's true. Okay, so what are the strategies you think are to be adopted to open an evaluation speech?
The most obvious one, and the one that is ignored the most, is the objectives of the speech. Every speech in Toastmasters in Pathways has an objective. And yet I hear lots of people giving evaluations where nobody mentions the objectives of the speech. So first and foremost, if you're not talking about the objectives of the speech, you're not doing a good job of evaluating and you're not providing a service for the person who's the speaker.
That's good. That's a very good point, Ron. I think it's always better to start with the content, and the content first should specify the objectives of the speech. So that's good. So when we do the evaluation, so how we can really go about giving a 360-degree evaluation? Are there any techniques that one can adopt to give a well-rounded evaluation?
I use 3 points of reference when I'm doing an evaluation. The first is I look at the objectives of the speech. That's the first thing that I'm looking at. And did the person meet the objectives? Now, if this is an ordinary speech in a Toastmaster club, I still use the framework of the judges form for the International Speech Contest. And when you look at that, you will see that 50% of the judging form is about the content of the speech. And then there's another 50%, which is broken down into delivery and language. So I'm looking at it from 3 points of view. Did the person meet the objectives of the speech? What's their content like? And then how is their delivery? So those are the 3 points. And I figure that gives a balance to an evaluation. If you don't have that balance, people I often see doing evaluations, they'll talk about just one aspect of the 3. And the most that they talk about is, to me, the least important, and that's the delivery. They'll talk about body language, they'll talk about gestures and things like that. Well, you can't have a good speech if you don't have great content. And so content has to be the center of an evaluation. So if it's in a club situation where you're evaluating somebody's speech, did they meet the objectives? What was the content like the speech structure? Was there a good opening, a body, and a conclusion? Were there ideas? Were they rational? Did they make sense when they were talking? And then the last part for me is body language and gestures. You can have great body language and gestures, but if you're giving a vacuous speech, it doesn't work. You have to have content as well.
That's absolutely fantastic. And well said, Ron, that objective, the content, and the delivery is the key aspects of any evaluation speech. Okay, so when we have to focus on all these aspects, there'll be a lot of time constraints too. Am I right, Ron? So how can we effectively manage time to organize the evaluation speech?
Well, hang around Toastmasters. After your third meeting, you'll know that time and how we manage time is really important in Toastmasters. So one has to learn how to edit comments. So when I'm doing an evaluation, I have a blank sheet of paper in front of me, and I'm just making notes throughout
Mhm.
that speech that I'm listening to. I don't know what I'm going to say when I'm making the notes, but usually there's a few minutes between when I have to give the evaluation and from when I've finished listening to the speech. So then I will take, if I'm writing in a blue pen, I will then take a red pen and I will highlight and star the points that I want to talk about. And I will always have in the back of my mind my matrix, my template, speech objectives, content, and then the
Delivery.
deliverables. And so I try to comment on each of those three segments. And
Mhm.
usually you have a 3-minute evaluation, 2 to 3 minutes to do an evaluation. So I want to talk about each of those segments. Having said that, I'm a great believer in the gestalt of a speech. And that is, how did it strike me overall? So I'm going to have some comments. Did I like the speech? If I didn't like the speech, what was it that turned me off a bit about the speech? And how can I help that speaker maybe improve the next time out? So I'm looking for ways that I can help the speaker improve. But I'm a firm believer that in an evaluation, for every 2 things that you say positive about a speaker, you should say 1 thing where they can improve in a speech. So often that's not the case. I would say elementary evaluators, once they've started to look at speeches and listen to them, they can pick apart speeches. And so they'll have the opposite ratio. They'll have many points to improve, but not a lot of points about what is good. And what I found is that if you have a whole bunch of points to improve, the speaker stops listening to you. They'll listen if you talk about the things that they did well. So make sure you talk more about things that they did well than areas that they need to improve.
That's very true. So, how should a Toastmaster prepare for an evaluation contest?
An evaluation contest. Well, that is very different. It's a totally different situation than in a club setting. And it really depends where you're giving an evaluation, because with Zoom today, you can go to clubs all around the world and in all sorts of districts. And what I found is that in different districts, they evaluate in different ways. And it's if you're going to win the contest, you have to understand the culture of evaluation in that particular district. It's very different. I have a friend who's a very talented and district champion in Scotland, and he and I compare notes about how contests are judged in Scotland and how they're judged in Canada. They're very different. So you have to understand the culture of evaluation in a certain district to pick out what works. In North America, you can be a little bit more flamboyant. And in North America, according to my Scottish friend, there's much more emphasis put on the delivery and the language and the gestures, where that's not as important in Scotland. So you have to know what happens. And the best way to figure out that is to study people who have won the district contests in that district in past years. You can get videos of them. The most clubs have them, or districts have them. So study what was successful in the past.
That's a very good piece of advice, Ron. So when I was thinking about how you were saying about the cultural aspect, I forgot to ask one important point when we are giving the speech and everything. We forgot to tell about the conclusion, right? Do you think it is important to conclude? What methods do you prescribe for conclusion? I would like to hear from you about that. Is a summary important?
It's vital. And I try to teach that to people I'm mentoring from the icebreaker on. And
Oh,
why not learn it in an icebreaker? Because then you can learn it and apply it to every speech that you give ever after. The conclusion has to link up to what you started your speech with. You've got to wrap it up. It's a summary statement, yes,
yeah.
but there should be a direct link. Like if you start out with a quote from some famous person, can you conclude with another quote from that person? Or can you link your conclusion to that quote that you started out? I mean, you're starting with a central idea and you introduce it conceptually in the first 2 or 3 sentences of your speech. That conclusion's got to tie in to those opening comments, or you're kind of left just hanging. And of course, you would mark down that kind of a speech. The summary is there. You've got to wrap it up.
That's always good to become like a sandwich. You start off with a quote and then you deliver some content and then again you refer to that quote and then you conclude it. It's absolutely, I think it will grab the attention of the audience.
True. I mean, you can look at it as a book too. And if you're reading a nonfiction book, most great nonfiction books, they'll have an epilogue. Well, your conclusion is kind of like an epilogue. You wrap it up and you can allude to other things. For instance, you can say, in my next speech, I'm going to tackle this other aspect of something, but it takes you to another place. And that conclusion is really important.
Yeah, that's true. I agree to it. So as an experienced evaluator, what is your advice to the new Toastmasters to prepare themselves for the evaluation contest?
Well, we touched on that before a little bit about preparing for the
Yes,
contest.
correct.
The great thing about Toastmasters is you learn by studying role models. So I'd be looking at the good evaluators in my club. And today it's so easy to travel to other clubs on Zoom. So you can look at good evaluators in other clubs and see what it is that they're doing. And of course, as I mentioned, going back and looking at videos of evaluation champions. And here's something else. Don't just do it in your district. If you're interested, look at the championship speeches in other districts, because maybe you can introduce a point or a technique that nobody in your district is using. You want to differentiate yourself from all of the competitors that you have. And so that's a good way of doing it. And of course, one of the easiest ways to do that is go to an evaluation contest in another district and pick that up. So I'm saying you have to know the style in your club, in your district, but you can also pick up something in another district that will help you to differentiate yourself from your competitors. You always want to do that.
That's very good point. It will be unique and it will be refreshing idea. And maybe we can also become a trendsetter in the place where we are actually doing our evaluation.
To be good at evaluation and to win contests, you got to become a student of evaluations. So if your goal is to be the world champion of public speaking, there isn't anybody that I've known who's had that as a goal, who hasn't gone back and watched countless times the speeches that have won at the International Speech Contest. Well, there aren't evaluation contests at the international level, but there are at district levels. So if you want to be a champion evaluator, study champion evaluators. It's as simple as that.
Okay, so that's very true. It's always good to go and refresh our minds, look at various speeches, see and practice in order to prepare yourself for the evaluation contest. So that was wonderful talking to you, Ron. Thank you so much for your valuable time and knowledge that you have shared with us today. And I am sure and I hope that this will build all the budding evaluators in their Toastmasters journey.
Thank you.
So this is Juliet signing off. Thank you.